This is Ken Dillette coming to you from Digital Disruption in 2014 here in San Jose, California. This is part of our Catalyst Live streaming program, and I'm bringing to you some of our catalysts that were involved in the virtualization space, feeding their pragmatic results into the Zoom program. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dave Gall, and part of the CloudNFV 2.0 Catalyst. Dave, all yours.
Hey, Ken, how you doing? You have a housekeeping.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Sorry you weren't able to attend. It was a great conference here in San Jose, and it was great to get all traffic to the Catalyst area and to make our presentations as usual. So some of you will know us from Nice and our CloudNFV 1.0, and we've returned. We were actually the award-winning most innovative solution from Nice in June. And we're back again with pretty much the same team. Let me just quickly introduce. So I'm David Gall, I'm the founder and managing director of Enterprise Web. We provide the enabling technology, the architecture and implementation that CloudNFV runs on, the platform. Our co-lead was John Strassner at Quality, and presenting with me here in San Jose was Fred Keisland, from many of you know from both TMF, the Zoom, and Etsy, as an NFV architect, and our demo god, Bill Malik. And we're going to do the live demo today, so you won't see his smiling face. So CloudNFV is all about making NFV real. Actually, making virtualization real. How's that for a paradox? We're all about making virtualization real for the carriers to prove the key objectives of both the Zoom, TMF Zoom, as well as Etsy NFV. And we would state those pretty much right out of the literature as DevOps, driving automations for zero-touch orchestration, operations management, for accelerating service velocity and business agility, right? So we look at this as very much, and I believe consistent with the views of the carriers, as a business-driven initiative, not just an architectural exploration, but something that is supposed to be delivering business value to help you deliver new products and services to markets more quickly. So once again, we won the award in Nice. I'll skip over that. Let me introduce you to our ecosystem there. So CloudNFV is a network in a box. You can actually even say a virtualization lab in a box. You know, we're deployed in labs. We're deployed in Sprint in under 30 minutes, running local on their COTS x86 boxes, and their engineers were actually able to spin up and compose virtual functions shortly thereafter, that same day. Our team includes a great group of VNF providers and others, including Metaswitch, Clearwater IMS, Connectum EPC, Marisoft is providing a VCPE, or ENOV, Cosmos API, Aeroflex that we're working with on service assurance and validation, and Edis Research has been kind enough to loan us some base stations that we've been using to do an end-to-end ENOV presentation. And we did that live here in Nice. And actually, not only do we do it live, for the purposes of the conference, here in the San Jose Digital Disruption. So not only did we do it live, we had to move it several times and therefore prove the portability of our virtualization initiative as we moved our base station all around San Jose. And you know, it's all about flexibly and dynamically composing network services, right? Because I think there's a lot of things that people need to think about when they move to virtualization. Is right when we move, when we abstract the network functions from those appliances, and now have to manage them as software. We have to, how are we going to dynamically and flexibly compose them into services, manage those services for their life cycle, scale them up and down with activity on the network, et cetera, for the end-to-end life cycle. So the CloudNFV, both the platform and the ecosystem, is composed of an integration platform. Think of that as a PaaS, Platform as a Service. I think a term many of you are familiar with. An open and extensible ecosystem. As you saw, all those different vendors are participating. Most of those vendors were onboarded in between 30 minutes and a couple of hours. So we made it very easy for vendors to declaratively connect themselves to the system. And we do this all based on an information model-based abstraction, right? And this is key. This is our key relationship to the Zoom work. We actually have relationships to many of the Zoom domain assets, policy, contracts, GB922, GB942, etc. But the information model, the SID, is really what makes everything architectural. And we would implore everyone who's considering virtualization, moving ahead with these initiatives, to really consider that you want your information models and architecture to drive your virtualization solutions. You don't want siloed, static scripts doing one-off implementations. It won't scale with your operations. So we have a strengthened policy base, and the whole platform, that SDN integration platform, the PaaS, includes orchestration and analytics services. And it actually includes an extensible amount of services. So just as you can actually extend the number of virtual network function providers, the VNF providers, you can actually add more functions into this service as well to compose new and more interesting services. So it's really a future-forward platform. It has broad industry support, and we're really thankful for all of these sponsors, these champions, these TMF champions. They've all returned from CloudNFV 1.0, so we take that as a great testament to their faith in our project. And again, special thanks to John Strachan from Huawei for being co-lead of our Catalyst here. So CloudNFV 2.0 is deployed on so since NICE, our project activity, we were deployed in Carrier Labs. I gave you the one reference, and they deployed the software as a small footprint, deploys very quickly, has almost no requirements. Now, those are technical details at some level, but there are other considerations you have to make about when you're thinking about virtualization at the edge network, right? You're going to need software that can deploy very efficiently. You don't want to replace hardware and appliance complexity with software complexity. If you ask anybody who's worked in the enterprise, and including your own central enterprise IT folks, they'll tell you, or you'll find out how complex it is to manage sort of conventional enterprise software stacks. So we are providing innovation in that regard as well. So we added ConnectMV EPC and Microsoft Virtual eNodeB as well, as directed by carriers. Both of those are done in the course of a day or two, maybe a week with some engineering calls. We demonstrated some new use cases. A big and important one was bring your own device with Aeroplex. We did a demonstration at VMworld where we actually showed a single implementation that's capable of deploying via OpenStack or VMware. And this is really important. Once again, I know that many people are focused on the product side and the business side, and that's, of course, the ultimate use of these technologies. But actually having a flexible technology underneath and understanding those value propositions is equally important for you in the long run. So whether you want to run on Docker, or now CoreOS has its own container mechanisms, you want to run on VMware, maybe you have large existing investments in VMware, or you want to run in OpenStack, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to do that off a single implementation. We've demonstrated service training. We've major optical network switch provider. Optical switch provider has now embedded us as an appliance, and we're doing service training on behalf of them, replacing very old C code, which was not really easy to maintain, not easy for people to read and understand. And we did this, actually, the actual implementation took a day. New platform capabilities. We've extended and exposed more of the information model-driven aspects of our system. Again, we both, as a work example, we both inform the activity of Zoom and then are informed by the work of Zoom. And that is a cycle, and I think we're actually essentially cycling upwards to deliver a full set of integrated TMF domain assets delivered through a platform. And that is our plan for upcoming release in 2015. And more explicit hooks for linking policies on all objects, and that's going to be important as well. So let's talk at a higher level. At a higher level, what we're really talking about is policy-controlled infrastructure. And I think the most important thing to do is, if we raise this back to the business level, is to raise our abstractions so that management can express its intent through policy over infrastructure without worrying about implementation details. Right? Because at the end of the day, nobody on the business side wants to care, let's be honest, about how it gets implemented. In fact, they just want to know it gets flexibly implemented based on their policies. They just want to know they get the behavior out of the network that they want when they want it, and it's reliable, and it's scalable, and it's secure, and it's safe. And that's what we're all about. So we essentially expose our platform as a northbound API to OSS BSS. You could build an entire OSS BSS out of our platform, and there are people talking to us about that, because fundamentally we're an application platform. But we also can just point ourselves to your existing OSS BSS solution. We extract all of that underlying MANO, management and operations complexity, all of that, all the various interfaces are all hidden and abstracted away. That simplifies the solution architecture and again allows you to essentially write network services by declarative policies in a very simple, intuitive, easy way that has actually real impact in your network. So many of you will be very familiar with the sort of canonical ETSI diagram for which we've overlaid the CloudNFV solution, and in particular the enterprise web platform, right? So what we're showing here is that you're not going to see my pointer anyway, so I won't point on the screen. So what you're seeing here is we're doing something that actually is not supported or not directly described by ETSI, but it is actually what the work of the team at Zoom is describing. It's describing a framework, a platform for managing virtualization, and actually more than just virtualization, both virtual network functions and physical network functions in a holistic environment. Well, how do you get there? Well, if you're going to get there, you actually have to really think about creating an information fabric. We were talking about information models before. So you actually, the way to connect things is not to tightly couple them. It's not to integrate them in a static way, because we know that when we statically integrate things, they break when there's change in any dimension. Well, what we want to do is have all of your various network resources and virtual functions and your protocols essentially referenced as endpoints, as independent, isolated objects that hide their dependencies. That allows us then to compose them in sort of point-and-click kind of fashion. And then the system will, and so they're not actually tightly coupled to that network service. They're linked to the information fabric, and the network service is really pointing also to the information fabric. And that means the whole thing stays very liquid, right? And gives you a lot of flexibility. It also means that there can be change in the underlying endpoints that don't break your network services. And again, that is critical to you, because one thing as the telecom and carrier industry, as you guys move from a sort of slow-moving physical stream to a very fast-moving digital river, the things that you need to consider is change in all axes. We're not going to all of a sudden, meet in a couple of days and create the definitive architecture for the future of all mankind. What's going to happen is standards as we see, and related standards as we see coming from ETSI and Tosca and IETF are going to continue to evolve, right? And we're going to support those evolutions in the information model in the SID, right? And we're going to also have to support change in your virtual network function providers. Your VNF interfaces, your VNF providers are going to be updating and providing new capabilities, so they're going to update and upgrade their virtual network functions. But even more than that, you're going to want to dynamically substitute virtual network functions on the fly based on KPIs, right? You might actually have an algorithm that runs over the top, part of your network service, that actually says, hey, pick this VNF provider based on their ability to meet SLA, right? These are important things. They don't come, you will not achieve them through conventional methods. You need to think differently. And this was a message that came up again and again. Ken Philbeck and others here in San Jose have been talking about this all week long. So one of the nice advantages of what we're doing here is when we bring all those components together in this information fabric, is we're able to reason over that in one space and to do something that you can't even really do in any combination of orchestration and big data. We're bringing all the pieces together and then we're running our functions over the top of them. And that is incredibly efficient, 50 to 100 times more efficient than trying to do that in any kind of traditional stack. And what you see, what we get from here is true feedback loops. And that's, again, what you're going to need. You're not just, you're not just firing off. It's not as simple as just dropping a virtual network function onto a VM and then just, ignoring it, right? You're going to need, your networks are volatile. You're going to need information about the state of the network. Your policies are going to be changing. And that's another whole point of virtualization, is that I'm quite confident that the manager is going to be changing policies far more frequently than it ever has, because it can, right? As it introduces new services and it introduces new policies, you're going to have new power over the network that you didn't have before. Well, you're going to want all of these things to relate to each other, right? You're going to want events triggering orders that are guided by policies, that are informed by the state of the network, that drive contextual executions. So enterprise web and CloudNFV, the ecosystem and the platform can act as, we can serve as just sort of the reasoning layer, right? Just the fabric. You might think in conventional terms, we'd be really a modern overlay. Instead of sort of static topology over the top of your network, we'd be a dynamic, information network over the top of your environment. We can serve just that purpose and then essentially feed your orchestrators, but we can also provide the orchestrator role and the DNF manager role as part of a unified architecture. In reality, we suspect that you'll have more than one orchestrators, and you absolutely will have more than one DNF managers, of which we may be one. And will just be another opportunity for you, and you'll gain some benefits when that is the case. But you'll also have the affordance or flexibility to use any other orchestrator you want or any other DNF manager you want for any reason that you want. And again, flexibility, you can see, is a recurring theme here. You're going to need that. It's not a question of me saying it. This is going to be an operational reality for you. So what do we get from all of this? It's agility, right? Dynamic data-driven policy control for agility. And if you're following Zoom and you're looking at the most recent work products of Zoom, this is all, if not explicit, it's all implicit in their writings and documents. And how are we implementing that specifically is we're automating interoperability. Remember, we've got that loose coupling. We're letting things bind logically and dynamically at runtime based on the needs of a business service. We're using network state, right, to optimize service behavior based on the context. So we're dynamically configuring, VMs, et cetera, or dynamically configuring devices. Dynamic adaptation, the ability to actually change so that the service actually stays resilient even though things underneath it might be changing. And I think this is an important one, and it hasn't come up too much because I think it's a little bit ahead of the game, though it is, again, being spoken about here in TMF, is policy. Beyond just the mechanics of moving DNFs and managing my operations, how about my security? How about my identity? How about my business compliance? How about my governance? I mean, these are core functions of your highly regulated operations. And you don't want to be just having perimeter security and managing things obliquely. You can't have static compliance and static security. It won't serve you in this new dynamic environment. What you want to do is you want to own your events. You want to actually be able to put your policies and your security inside your interactions, because that's where things are happening. Don't do it after the fact. Don't do it in isolated locations. You want to wrap every transaction, every interaction in security, compliance, and governance. Again, critical to your success. Cumulatively, these pieces actually help you support diversity, cope with volatility, manage change, and implement your policies. And so, again, I'm trying to implore you to think architecturally. Whether you think of CloudNFV or you think about other solutions, as you think about yourselves and your own operations, think about architecture. Design matters. So really quickly, in summary, I'll give you some bullets here. Yeah. So this is, orchestration has been a term that has been bandied about quite heavily inside the industry writ large. And I think it's generally, if I may, it's a term that's become heavily overloaded. And I think what happens is, people say, hey, look, I've got all these northbound APIs. And then you ask them, and how do you work with them? Oh, we orchestrate them, or they'll be orchestrated. Orchestrated where? I think it's essentially the term orchestration has become this sort of punt, where everybody's actually saying, hey, it'll be taken care of in some northbound layer undescribed. Some undefined magical place will handle this orchestration. But the reality is, orchestration means something specific. It's something born essentially in IT terms. It comes from service orientation. It's a notion that, when you loosely couple something, you'll have to put them together. Now, orchestration in this SOA sense, in the service-oriented architecture sense, has a very specific meaning. It generally means that you're going to distribute a problem over a network of middleware components, right? And instead of taking one problem and solving it in one place and reasoning it together, you're going to distribute it to 10 different black boxes, and each black box is going to come back with one piece of the problem. The problem with that approach is that nobody is looking at the overall end-to-end solution. This would be the equivalent of me getting 10 people in a room and whispering part of my problem into the first person's ear, and they each do that down the line. But we never actually talk across the table to each other and actually reason through the problem. Because A, we do it much faster, and B, we do it much better. If the way I do orchestration is to take the output of A and make it the input of B, that is a very limited computation. static, linear, and stable. The application middleware stack itself introduces cost, complexity, and latency. Okay? These are things that you could overcome. You certainly have worked with middleware before in your organizations, but if you want to start taking the benefits of virtualization out to the edge, which I think is one of the primary drivers here, then you have to really think about that cost, complexity, and latency that you're putting all over the network. The other aspect here is that in such a conventionally orchestrated environment, if you were to use this, excuse me, my throat is getting parched. In a conventionally orchestrated environment, the network services, since they're written over all, the applications are written across all these components, would only be as strong as the weakest link, right? So even if one component says, hey, we're scale out, we're super fast I/O, but the application requires all of them. And so the one that's weakest, if one is broken, it's done, right? And so that's another consideration, that you're making inherently a vulnerable architecture. And there is no mechanism when you're working in, and many of you are familiar with service-oriented architecture, you're very familiar with the challenges of implementing policy consistently over black box APIs and web services, right? The whole point of these black box APIs and services is that they hide your implementations. Well, if I'm dealing with a lot of black boxes, how do I consistently do security across all of them? How do I consistently manage my compliance? They're all black boxes to me. So these are things that you need to think through. And most importantly, though, this might be the most abstract, the kinds of problems that you're asking from a software perspective, when you're actually saying, I need my network service to look at the requirements of a virtual network function and how much network and storage and compute it needs of the network based on a scale-up factor. What does the network have to offer me, and what are the policies that are being applied? That's a pretty tricky constraint satisfaction problem, and that is not what conventional orchestration is designed to solve. So these are things that we've addressed in CloudNFV by providing a fully dynamic solution. So thank you for all your time today, and I'll give it back to you. If there's any questions or anything?
Sure. Dave, one of the things that I'd like to ask you about is, one of the topics here at Digital Disruption has been the role of DevOps in a NetOps environment, and there's been a lot of concern about, what are the ramifications of that. So I'd like to ask you, what have your experiences? What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I think DevOps is critical because DevOps is almost the foundation that gives us automation. Right? DevOps is the ability to take things that were done by isolated groups of siloed parts of your IT operations and expose them in a way that's going to be managed by another layer, right? So now we can have collaboration across IT so that each IT group can essentially expose their services. So by exposing the infrastructure with operations, by exposing operations, what it does is it gives power to the app developer community. Because now app developers, instead of waiting for third parties to build up boxes or set up things for them, can now call those operation services and use them and bake them into their applications. And that's a foundational, just as virtualization, like the hypervisor, are all critical components of that are bringing us to this inflection point. DevOps is one of those foundational aspects.
Thank you. You'd mentioned the role of the information model.
Yep.
And I know that's one of the things that seems to be a reoccurring theme across multiple SDOs, and it's something that seems to be gaining importance. You want to share your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, well, I think it is absolutely, I think there's growing awareness for it. I think, and you certainly know, Ken, I think the history of SDOs is that they work on standards from interfaces up. And because they're not necessarily thinking about the end implementation, they're just thinking about what they want, the capabilities they want to expose in a standard way, about interoperability. But that interoperability over the last 10, 20 years is historically could be defined as static interoperability. Like, here's an interface, I connect to this interface, I tend to couple with that interface. The role of the information model is to take all of those interfaces and represent them at a higher level, right? With other valuable information, like valuable information that entities that define your products, right? Entities that define aspects that include policy. Information models also include policy, right, as an aspect above the data models. So while I think many SDOs are working and and still evolving standards for interfaces, it's really only the only work that I really see as far as bringing that all together is inside the TNF Zoom, where they're saying, gosh, we actually have to have a model of all of this in one place. That gives you the fabric, right? If we can actually have, if we can, we have the SID, it's a great asset. It has to be extended in certain specific ways and modified in certain specific ways to support these more dynamic implementations. But that's not a lifetime away. That's actually very close. And with the recent outputs, people can see the progress that's being made in that group. And we hope over the next 3 to 6 months that we'll be able to represent that through CloudNFV in a very holistic way, so people actually will see the familiar, well distributed, well evolved, highly evolved, widely adopted, TMF assets being represented in a virtualization platform to deliver services. And I think that gets to the point that we discussed inside our meetings is non-destructive transformation, right? Everybody knows they need to transform. Well, you don't want to do transformation by just jumping off the cliff, right? So your operations have already invested heavily. You have your own staff resource assets that know these models, are very familiar with them. Let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Let's use these models and build on them as a foundation for the next thing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dave, and looking forward to
Thank you, everybody.
next year.